Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create the human being? This is a question that we hear many times. We might think about it and wonder about it many times. And a lot of times we hear answers to this question that may not be the most comprehensive of answers. It may not be answers that give us enough context as it relates to the real answer to this question. One of those answers that we are given, and of course you found it in the verses of the Quran as well, is that the human being was created in order to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This answer, though it is correct, it is part of the verses of the Quran, it is not the final answer to that question. Meaning one of the goals of our creation was to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But not because worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the final goal, rather because there was something else that was going to come out of our worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that thing or things is the final purpose of our creation. And one reason that we know that this is not the final purpose of our creation, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to be worshipped, is because the Quran itself tells us in verse 19 and verse 20 of Surah Al-Anbiya that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already has hundreds or thousands of angels worshipping Him day and night, right? So the verses of the Quran say that He has angels with Him who worship Him. They never have enough arrogance to say no to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا يَسْتَحْسِرُونَ, and they never get tired of it either. This is what the verses of the Quran say. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already has angels who are worshipping Him day and night, and I say the only reason why He created the human being was just to worship Him, and that's it, end of story, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't add up. Rather, it is through the worship of the human being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was trying to achieve something else. And that something else was the perfection of the human being. And to put it in simple terms, if the human being, the more perfect he becomes, in other words, the better of a human being he becomes, the more he benefits from the pleasures of the next world. Yes, the more he pleasures, the higher status he will have in heaven. So if someone wanted to summarize all of this, say, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create the human being? The simple answer is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the human being in order to have him become the best version of himself possible, and by extension of that, to live forever in bliss and blessings. That's the final goal. In order to get there, yes, worship is a part of it. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the verses of the Quran, we created you so that you would worship us. But the worship itself is not the final goal, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already had angels worshiping Him. It is the benefit that you and I take from worship, which is bettering ourselves as human beings, and hence taking pleasure and experiencing all the bliss and blessings that heaven has to offer. That's only going to be available if I actually worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if I actually obey Him when I have a chance to choose between good and evil. So just the worship was not the main goal. He already had angels worshiping Him. It was what was going to come out of that worship, which is your perfection, which will present itself the most in heaven. What a merciful God who created you and I to get us there just so that we would experience the bliss and the blessings and the presence of Himself in heaven.